So let us first go to Professor John Mearsheimer, a well-known professor at the University of Chicago, who has been a keen observer of competition between big powers, historically and currently. The question I would like to pose to him is this: what does global rule setting mean? Is global rule setting necessary, inevitable, or feasible? How is the rule setting changing? From whom to whom? In whose favor? To which others' favor? Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the short-term future of interstate relations, that is, rule-setting changes? I guess 6 or 7 minutes would be too short, but he is a good professor who can do it well within that time.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Rules are absolutely essential because they're necessary to facilitate cooperation among states. That can be true even with regard to adversaries. The United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War had all sorts of rules of the road to help manage relations between the two countries. So this is why we have rules. And by the way, another word for rules is institutions. International institutions are basically all about rules that prescribe acceptable behavior and proscribe unacceptable behavior. So rules or institutions, call them what you want, matter greatly in international politics. The $64,000 question, as we say in the United States, is who writes the rules? Because as you all know, whoever writes the rules is going to write them in ways that benefit the country that is in charge of rule writing. And my argument is that the most powerful states in the system write the rules. And in fact, the balance of power determines who gets to write the rules. It is the case, in my opinion, that the rules reflect the balance of power. And of course, if you look at all of the international institutions around the world today, most of them contain rules that were written by the United States, because the United States has been the most powerful state on the planet for quite a long time. And of course, the United States wrote those rules so that they benefit the United States more than anybody else. This is not to say that countries like South Korea and China don't benefit from the rules, but the United States goes to great lengths to make sure it benefits the most. And by the way, if in a certain situation the United States doesn't like the rules that it wrote, it either rewrites them or it ignores the rules. That's the way great powers behave. Now, the question that is facing us is, how is China likely to think about the existing rules in the international system? Well, the Chinese didn't play an important role at all in creating the existing international institutions or in writing the rules that are now out there in the international system. They, of course, have benefited greatly from those rules, but they didn't write them. At the same time, what's happening is China is becoming more and more powerful every year. The global balance of power is shifting in favor of China and against the United States. Not surprisingly, ladies and gentlemen, the Chinese want to rewrite the rules. They'd be foolish not to want to rewrite the rules. If the United States and China were in opposite positions and the United States was rising, the United States would want to rewrite the rules. They would want to create either new institutions or alter the institutions that now exist. So I think what you're going to see in the future is a real tug of war. It's not going to be a shooting war by any means, but you're going to see a real tug of war between the United States on one hand and the Chinese on the other. And the United States is going to do everything it can to maintain the existing rules and to do what it can to deny China the ability to rewrite the rules in the existing institutions or create new institutions. The Chinese, of course, are not going to stand for this. The Chinese are going to go to enormous lengths to alter the rules. And I don't blame them one bit. And the AIIB is a perfect example of that. So the most interesting question in my mind as we move along here is whether the Chinese can pretty much alter the existing institutions and get more and more power at America's expense, or whether that will not happen, and therefore they'll have to create more institutions like the AIIB. But regardless of whether you get more new institutions or whether you get more fundamental change in the existing institutions, the fact of the matter is that the rules are going to change in fundamental ways. And the rules are going to change in large part because the balance of power is changing in China's favor and against the United States. And that means the status quo cannot last over the long term, which is regrettable from my point of view, but not from the gentleman on my left's point of view. Thank you.
Let me ask Professor Mearsheimer a question. Is there a different perspective vis-à-vis China between the United States and Europe that I just mentioned, as the U.S. sees how Britain seems to be too receptive of China?
Just to start, over its history, the United States has cared greatly about three areas outside of the Western Hemisphere: Europe, Northeast Asia, and the Persian Gulf. And historically, Europe has been the most important area of the world to the United States. A fundamental change is taking place in, let's call it, our grand strategy. And East Asia is going to become the most important area of the world for the U.S., and Europe is going to become the third most important area of the world. And actually, it's going to be a distant third. And this is mainly because the United States, and you see this with the pivot to Asia, is deeply concerned about China and is going to go to great lengths to contain China's rise. The question you want to ask yourself is, how are the Europeans likely to view China? The fact is that China is in no way a threat to Europe in the way it's a threat to the United States. And furthermore, there's nothing the Europeans are going to do to help the United States contain the Chinese, because the Europeans have diminishing military power, and they never had much military power to begin with. That means that over time, relations between China and Europe are going to get better and better, and there's going to be more and more trade. And at the same time, relations between the United States and China are going to get worse. And the United States is going to be angry on numerous occasions with the Europeans for trading with the Chinese. So the conflict that was reported in the Financial Times, which our chairman was just referencing, is just the beginning of big trouble that lies ahead between the United States and the Europeans, because the Europeans are going to think differently about trading with China than the United States and its Asian allies will.